We've been getting a lot of questions lately on TripWizard and GPSs, and more specifically, how to import a trip from TripWizard into a GPS. If this is something you've been curious about, today's your lucky day. Hi, I'm Dan. Dean is sitting this one out, and we're Rivers to Ridges RV. Now for this demo, I have a Garmin GPS, and I also have TripWizard. So we're going to cover basically the steps on getting a trip from TripWizard into a Garmin GPS. And mine happens to be the Garmin the 890 RV version. There's going to be three major steps to this, three things you have to have available to you. One will be TripWizard. The second one is BaseCamp, and this is an application you can download from Garmin. And the third, of course, is your Garmin GPS. So we're going to go ahead and get started with TripWizard. If you're an RVer, or especially if you're a full-time RVer, you've probably heard of TripWizard. If you haven't, at a high level, what it is, it's an application or a website that allows you to create trips, different legs of trips, and it's supposed to be RV safe trips. Now what that really means is when you create an account or you create a trip with TripWizard, you can enter in your specs for your RV, like the length and the height, the weight, if you're carrying propane. Then when you create a trip, it takes all that into consideration, so it won't route you underneath a low bridge, or if there's a bridge that only takes so much weight, if you're too heavy, it won't put you, route you over that bridge. So it's an RV safe route, and that's TripWizard. Now, if you don't already have TripWizard, this is their TripWizard website. You can sign up and create a subscription with them. If you want to just look at it, you can also do a 7-day free trial as well. Now once you have your subscription to TripWizard, it allows you to create trips, different legs of trips, and then we can take one of those trips and download that into our GPS. So step number one, we need to get a subscription to TripWizard, and then we'll create a trip. You can see here I have TripWizard opened up. I created a very simple demo trip. We just have 5 stops in it. Again, this is just kind of a sample, but something to use for the demo. So what we want to do is we want to take this trip and we want to import this into our Garmin GPS. So step number one for us, after the trip is created, we're going to go up here and click on this little wrench icon. We will scroll down to Export Trip, click on that, and then we want to do a GPS export. Go ahead and click on that. Now at this point you have two options. You have a CSV file, which stands for comma separated value. That's usually used for like an Excel spreadsheet. Or you have the GPX file, and that's the one we want. That's for our GPS. So we're going to go ahead and download the GPX file. Once we click on that, you'll see our file has been downloaded, and you may happen to notice the name of the file. This one happens to be called demo tw to gps.gpx. That's just the name of the trip. I named this trip demo tw, stands for TripWizard. So demo TripWizard to GPS. Now that we have this file downloaded onto our computer, the next thing we have to do is to either download and install Garmin's BaseCamp. If you already have that downloaded, you can just open it up. But I'll go ahead and show you how to get to the BaseCamp and where to download it from and how to install it. I already have Garmin's website up, and don't worry, I'll put a link to these websites down below in the description of the video. But what you can see is we have BaseCamp, we have software version 4.7.4, and we can go ahead and click on download from here. Now you can see once it's downloaded, we have just a few seconds left. It is called BaseCamp_474.exe. Now that this is downloaded, or the download is complete, we can go ahead and double click on the file. Now that we double clicked on the exe file, you'll see we have the end user license agreement. It's up to you if you want to read this. You want to scroll down, make sure you hit I agree, and then click on install. And yes, we want to allow this app to make changes. And now that the BaseCamp is starting to install, we'll just give this a few minutes to run. Now that the installation is complete, all we have to do now is to launch the application. Now that BaseCamp is open, one of the first things I like to do is I like to create a new folder in my library. And this just allows me to organize trips. If I had maybe trips for 2022 or 2023, I can organize them in different folders. So what we can do in order to do that, and you don't have to do this, but under My Collection, just do a right click, create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this TW routes, and this is for Trip Wizard routes. Now that I have this new folder, I can come up to File and Import into TW routes, and I am going to select the file that we just downloaded from Trip Wizard. Remember, our Trip Wizard was called Demo TW to GPS. You can either double click this or select it once and then click Open. Now that we imported our trip into BaseCamp, you can see each of the legs is listed down below. But really important, you have to make sure at this point your GPS is attached to your computer. You can see also on the left-hand side that we have RV890. That's my GPS device. That's my Garmin GPS. If that's not plugged in, the application cannot import the legs or your trip into your GPS. The other thing you can see is we have the route. The route is basically outlined up here. Again, when we imported it, you can see that we have the import, the name of the trip has been imported. Again, under devices, this is our Garmin GPS. And down at the bottom, this is TW routes. These are each of the different legs of our trip. Now these first 5, these happen to be stopovers for our trip. If you wanted to, you could open these up, and if you had to modify the name or you want to put a comment in there or change the color of the flags or a different icon, you could do that. I don't think that's that important, but the other thing you can do is open up these down here on the bottom. You can see they have a different icon. If you do a right click on these and select Open, now you can look at each one of the legs and see step-by-step instructions on how, or directions I should say, for that leg. And this is kind of important. I don't use this here very often at this point, but it's just something nice to know. If you had any questions on your route, you can come into each one of these legs, look at them step by step. Now usually you can do this on your Garmin GPS as well once it's imported, but this is just something I wanted to make sure you're aware of. Okay, we'll go ahead and close this up. Now that we have our trip imported to BaseCamp, the last thing we have to do is just to import it into our Garmin. And you can see again, you have to make sure your device is listed here. All you have to do at this point is click on Device and Send to Device. Once this comes up, you're going to select the device. If you had multiple devices, they would all be listed here, but since we only have one GPS, we'll just highlight our GPS and select OK. Now while this is downloading, a couple things I want to make sure you're aware of. Whenever I download a trip into my GPS, it'll sit there and kind of spin. If you look at the GPS, you'll kind of get a rotating little icon that shows that something's going on. I've let that set for an hour and it never changes. So what I have to do is I make sure I give BaseCamp plenty of time to download my trip. And that's all going to depend on the length of your trip, how many stops or how many legs you have. Something this small with just 5 legs, a minute I think or 2 is probably plenty of time. What I have to do after that is I disconnect my Garmin from my computer, I turn it off, then I turn it back on again, and it's worked every single time. Something else to be aware of, and this is extremely important. Trip Wizard is a tool. It's supposed to help you with an RV safe route. Nothing's perfect. It's really up to you to double check, make sure your route is saved. If you have any questions at all, do a little bit of research and make sure you have a safe route. I gave BaseCamp about 2 minutes to download the trip into my GPS. Once those 2 minutes were up, I disconnected the GPS, I turned it off, and then I turned it back on again. And this is what we have. This is the Garmin 890. So as of right now, we downloaded those trips into our Garmin. If we want to see them, we go to Trip Planner, Saved Trips, And these are each of the legs of our trip. So at this point, if we were on the very first leg of our trip, we would just select it. These are your step-by-step directions for this trip. And then all you have to do is hit go, and the rest is up to you. Hopefully you know how to use your GPS. It's that simple. I know it's a little confusing the very first time you do it. Once you do this once or twice, it's actually a very, very simple process. I did give you a word of advice about TripWizard. Something else that I've noticed happens to me once in a while, and I don't know if this is Garmin or if it's TripWizard or if it's BaseCamp. Sometimes when I import these routes, they'll give me, even though the route looks correct in the beginning, it may give me some bad turns. I've seen lots of times where it will have me go past my destination, do some kind of a weird U-turn, and come back. So I'm always a little bit leery about this. And I always double check where I'm going before I leave. So I know when I'm going somewhere, I know that the campground, let's say, is on the right-hand side at about 1 mile after my last turn. So if my GPS is telling me to turn left 10 miles after that last turn, I know something's not right, and usually I'll have Dina plug in the address in our Ford's navigation system. At that point, we're close enough I can just kind of double check each other. So it's just something else just to be aware of. I know this is a very, very short video. I just wanted to get this out there because we did have a few questions about this. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. If I didn't explain something correctly or well enough, if you still have any questions, leave some comments below in the video. I will definitely get back to you and answer those. Hopefully this helps some people out. Remember, always live life to the fullest.